All right, this right here is one of my favorite synths. It's a SUB37 and it sounds absolutely amazing. But it kind of has two little flaws with it. One, as you can see, it's pretty big and it's really heavy, so it's kind of a pain to take it anywhere with you. And also, it's monophonic, meaning you can only play one note at a time. So if you have a cool sound on here and you want to play a chord, well, you're kind of out of luck. But that's where the MPC comes in. It has a really cool feature called Auto Sampler where you can essentially make key groups out of any synth that you connect to it. Now, I've actually gone ahead and made key groups out of the first 75 presets on here, which is free for my Patreon subscribers. The link is down below in the description. It's a pretty big expansion. It's about 4 gigs. And what we're going to do in this video is first, we're going to go over how to use the auto sampler to get any sound out of any synth. But then in the second half of the video, we're going to use that expansion pack to go through a bunch of different sound design ideas and take those sounds to the next level. We're going to start off with filtering and amp envelopes, and then we're going to add some effects. But what we're going to do is then assign those to the cue links so you have hands-on control like a real synth. And then we're going to save that so at any point in time, you can bring those sounds into any of your sessions. So first off, we're going to jump into using the auto sampler, and then we're going to go through and do some sound design. Now, one note about setting this up with the MPC, we're going to be using 2 connections here. We're going to be using both audio and MIDI. And what we're going to be doing is taking the MIDI output from the MPC and connecting that to the MIDI input on the SUB37, and then the audio output from the SUB37 to the audio input on the MPC. So essentially, we're creating a chain where we can send note value into the SUB37, trigger a note, and then record that audio back into the MPC. So now that we have everything physically connected together, let's take a look at how we set it up on the MPC. It's actually quite simple to set this up. The only thing we're going to need is a single MIDI track, which is then going to be sending MIDI out to the SUB37, and then we're going to route the audio back in. So here I created a single MIDI track. If you're brand new to the MPC, you can hit new track on the bottom and select MIDI, and then you'll see something along this lines. You probably won't have the channel strip open, so we're going to go ahead and open the channel strip. And then over on the 4th section here on the right is the I/O, and this is going to show us everything that's going in and out of this track. Down at the bottom here, we have the MIDI out port, and the SUB37 is connected just standard via 5-pin MIDI, so that's going to be MIDI port 1 on the list right here. Now, if I trigger something, you're going to see that it's sending out MIDI, but we're not going to hear anything back in because we have to set up some sort of audio monitoring. Couple of ways we could do this. We could set up a new track and select audio and then just have that as a monitor source. But we're going to make it even simpler. We're going to go into our menu here at the bottom, select sampler, and by default it's on input 1 and 2. However, the SUB37 is a mono single line, and that's just going into our input number 1. And then down here at the bottom, we want to make sure that we have our monitor set to in. Now, if we go back to our main screen, which is that MIDI track, and play something, we now are hearing the SUB37 triggering the MIDI, sending the audio back in, and we have a completed loop. Now we want to do the auto sampler. So there's a couple of ways to get the auto sampler, but we're actually just going to go into sampler, and we see this little keyboard right here. This is going to be the auto sampler. Now what's going to happen with the auto sampler, it's going to send MIDI notes out, it's going to trigger the SUB37 and record each one of those notes and then map it to a keyboard. This is great because it now allows us to have a mono synth that we can play polyphonically. We can take it with us wherever we want to go. Now, by default, it will just say the track name of the MIDI, whatever we had on here. So if we wanted to, we could name this a SUB37. We can see that we're recording from input number 1. And now the key range. Now the key range really depends on what kind of instrument you're going to be creating with the auto sampler. By default, it goes from C2 to C4, so you have kind of the mid 2 octaves of the key bed. You could go lower than that if you want to do a very low bass. You could go higher than that if you're going to do some strings. But what it will essentially do is the last note on C2, it will go lower than that. It will just stretch it on that. Now, below that, we have what's called the note stride. So the note stride is essentially how many steps are we going to sample, and then the MPC will essentially take that single sample and stretch it to make up the difference. So if we have a note stride of 6, let's say it's going to sample on the 1, then the next sample would be 6 steps up, and then it will split the difference between those two. So it will take the sample that's on the 1 and stretch it up 3, and then the sample that's on the 6, it will stretch it down 3 and then up another 3 until the next sample. Now, I've always gotten good results with Note Stride 6. However, if you're going to do something that's very detailed, maybe an instrument that has a lot of fidelity and you want as high resolution as possible, you could change that to Note Stride 1, meaning it's going to sample every single step, every single key, and then create an instrument. However, just be aware that that's going to lead to a much larger file size, and when you're making several instruments, that file size is going to build up rather quickly. Also with the velocity layers, so by default it's just a velocity set to 127, so max velocity. You have up to 8 different velocity layers, and you can see they're kind of spread out already for you. And if you're doing something, let's say like a very expressive piano that has a lot of dynamic between hitting it soft and hitting it hard, you may want to do multiple layers of velocity. Just remember though that every time you activate a new layer, it is going to then play that note twice, 3 times, all the way up to 8 times to grab each one of those velocity layers. And what you're looking at is a larger file size for the completed instrument, but also a lot longer of time because this actually does it in real time. So what we're going to do on this is we're actually just going to kind of play it safe and get a single layer here at 100, just so it's not full max on, but it's still high in velocity and it has a little bit of character to it. You can always do more, but just remember that's going to be a lot longer of time and it's going to be a lot larger file. Now scrolling down, we actually set how long we're going to sample for. So 3000 milliseconds is essentially going to be 3 seconds, and then how long is the release of that? So once the note is let go, how much longer is this going to continue to record? So let's just, as an example, hold down this note and see how long 3 seconds would be. And the release on that note is fairly quick. So the tail of 1 second would be totally fine. Now, it really depends on what you're trying to do with this. If you're doing a short little stab, you might be fine with 1 second or 2 seconds with a short tail. If you want to do a big long pad that you can hold and sustain, you might want to do 5 seconds. You can go online and find some general guidelines. A lot of times they say if you're doing something like a piano where you want to just hold that chord out, you may want to go all the way up to 20 seconds. So you can start understanding how making one of these is going to accumulate quite a bit of time. Now it is automated, you can just walk away, but it does take some time. If you're doing 8 layers of velocity, each one of those notes being held for 20 seconds, and then you're also doing a sample on each individual note, you have something that may take over an hour to create that single key mapped instrument. So for this all intents purpose, we're going to keep it at about 5 seconds. Actually, we'll go a little longer just so these can be held out if anybody wants to make some chords out of these. We'll go up to 8 seconds with a 1 second release. What is the name of these samples? So a lot of times I'll name them based on whatever preset I'm sampling. And now we have looping. Now looping will take a section of that and with a small crossfade and then essentially allow you to take a shorter sample and sustain and hold it. It works fairly well. However, if it's not perfect, you may have to go through every single sample and change the loop point or just test it and then do it again. So for this, we are going to actually keep the looping turned off. We are going to not have make current track because I'm just going to be sampling a bunch of these. And at the very bottom, it's going to show us, well, when those 2 octaves for holding it for 8 seconds and doing a note stride of 6, we're only going to be needing 36 seconds to do this. And let's just name this right here. We're going to name it Moog 1. Do it. And we hit do it, and we're gonna hear it start sampling, going through all of those, recording them one at a time, and then it's gonna map it across the keys and essentially create an instrument for us. All right, now that we have the expansion loaded into our MPC on our media card, let's go ahead and load up one of the key groups. By hitting load, or what we can do is inside of the main menu, we can go to the browse, and we're going to see the SUB37 right here. So make sure you have the program selection right there, and that will filter it. And while we're scrolling through these, we are going to hear a little bit of a preview of what each one sounds like. Let's just go ahead and load this one in here. Now, on the main menu, we are going to see a representation of the waveform that was tracked in. And by default, if we play a chord, it is going to be a polyphonic patch. So the first thing we're going to do is just take a look at some of the settings here to see if we wanted to play this as a mono or as a poly. Let's say we wanted to do this as a bass line and we weren't planning on doing any chords. That would be a situation where we want to do monophonic, but if we want to do chords, we would do polyphonic. So what we're going to do is hit edit right here at the bottom. If you're on another unit, you would look for the button that says program edit. And the first thing we see by default, it usually defaults to 16. So if I select that and then use the encoder over here that's off the screen, we can see we have the two options between mono and poly. Again, poly if I want polyphony, doing chords, or mono if I wanted it to do a single note bass line. All I can play is one bass note at a time. So right off the bat, let's just say we want to do a bass line with this. So we're going to select mono. Now the next thing is, do we want it to bend while we switch notes? So by going over here on MPC3, we see utilities. We're going to go into utilities. Now what we have is portamento, and this is the bending between the notes when they're held down. So if I just go ahead and crank this up, we'll do quite a high value here. And I'm going to play one note and then play another note. We can hear that it's bending in between those notes. I'm going to turn it down because I don't want that much movement. And now, if I want to have it where I hold a lower note and then I play a higher note, and after I release the higher note, it goes back to the lower note, I would need to turn on this mono retrig. Now when I play a note and then a higher note and release the higher note, we're going to hear it snap back to the original note. So those are kind of the primary settings that we would be using if we wanted to do a mono bassline synth. Now for this tutorial, I am going to be shaping a polyphonic synth patch, but anything we cover from this point forward can be also used to shape a monophonic bass patch. But first thing I want to do is just pull this down, take off the portamento, come over to my global, and I'm going to turn this back into poly, and now I can play chords. Now let's move on to the second stage of sound design, which is going to be using our amp envelope in order to shape the sound. Now, an amp envelope essentially dictates how the sound is going to come out of the synth and be delivered into our ears, and that is typically done with attack, decay, sustain, and release. We can see inside the MPC we have a couple of extra features like delay and hold, but we're not really going to focus on that right now. What we're going to focus on is attack, decay, sustain, and release. So by default, the synth comes on very strong. It's on for as long as I hold the keys down, and then when I let go of the keys, it instantly cuts off. But let's say we wanted to have this more of a pad. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to increase my attack. I can do it by pressing on the screen and using the encoder, or I can use my finger and then just pull this. Now when I play a chord, we're going to hear the sound swell in. And let's say I wanted it so as soon as I let go of the keys, it actually held out a little bit. That's where we'd increase a little bit of the release. Let's just crank this all the way up for demonstration's sake. My hands are off the keys, and we can see that it's still continuing to play. So with the attack, decay, sustain, and release, we can actually shape this anywhere from a very attacky pluck or a sustained pad with a long release. Now, to do sound design, it is a little tedious to sit here and touch the screen or mess with these knobs. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to use our cue links here to assign the first bank of our 4 cue links to the attack, decay, sustain, release. Now, in order to do that, what we have to do is first change the mode of these cue links. Pressing and holding on this, we can see that the cue links is actually in the screen view. But we want to set this to track, which means that now our cue links are going to be directly dictating anything that we assign to them from within this track. And I'm going to click cue link edit. And as we can see, we actually have a couple of parameters already assigned to these cue links. So I'm just going to quickly clear those out. So we're working with a completely blank slate. All right, now that these are cleared out, we can see we can go through our different banks of cue links. And on this very first one, what I want to do is assign this to the attack, decay, sustain, and release. And then we'll show how we can manipulate those values in order to create either a pluck or a pad or anything in between. Now, let's say on this first one, I want attack, decay, sustain, and release. So I touch the first one, and there's a couple of ways that I can actually assign parameters to these knobs. The first way is if I'm within this, I just hit the plus button right here. I go down into edit, which is basically the same as accessing this button right here. And I'm going to find the amp envelope attack. And now that that's assigned, we can actually hear the manipulation in real time. So, sharp attack, bringing it up. So I want to keep going and do the decay, sustain, and release. Now I could do it the typical way of just assigning it with this plus button right here, or I could use the learn feature. So if I activate learn right here and go back into my edit and then just touch on the parameter I want to assign to my last touch knob, and if we pull down on this upper menu, go to the second page, we can see that we're in learn mode and it's going to automatically select the last cue link that I touched. So I touch this one, I want it on decay, I give it a little wiggle, we get the response that it has been now assigned to here. I want to add this one to the sustain. So I touch this one, we can see that it's on cue link 5. Move this a little bit and we can see that it's been assigned. And now for the last one, I want to wiggle this one a little bit. And now we've mapped the attack, decay, sustain, release to this first bank of cue links. Let's make sure to take off the learn feature and then just hide this menu. And now, if we take a look, we have the ability to shape this sound with this first bank of cue links. So let's say I wanted to create a pluck. What I'm going to do is drop down the sustain, bring the release all the way down, and play around with this decay, creating a short volume spike, which will dictate how the sound of my short pluck comes through. I want it tighter than that. Now I have a very short, tight, plucky sound based on the amp envelope here. If I wanted something like a long evolving pad that slowly came in and then slowly released after I let go of the key, what I would do then is bring up the decay, bring up the sustain, bring up the release, and extend the attack. So now I have a little bit of distance on the attack. The volume's going to swell in. It's going to play at full volume. And now when I release, it's going to take a little bit of time to actually release. So let's hear this. And let's bring this farther for the attack. Maybe back a little bit. How about 3 seconds? So now that we have the ability to use this first bank of cue links to shape our sound, anything from a pluck to a pad to a lead, the next step would be taking the sound design even further and doing some sort of filtering. Now on the MPC 3 OS, we do have 2 filters that we can run in either parallel or series. But what we're going to actually do is just use the first one as an example. So by default, it's set to off, and our blend between the 2 filters is right in the center, and they're set to parallel. I only want to use the first one, so I'm going to change it to blend. And we're going to do the classic low pass filter, essentially cutting off the high frequencies. We have a couple of different values here, and we can actually see that they are just differences in the slope, meaning how dramatic is that cut going to be. And just so you know what the sound of the filter is going to sound like, let's go ahead and play a chord. And we can hear that now we're starting to manipulate the brightness of the sound, and we can make it evolve even more by cutting the highs. Now, in order to keep going with our theme of having a full hands-on synth, let's go over and click into our second bank of cue links and start assigning this second bank to some of the main parameters of this filter. The first one being cutoff. Now, since we're already on the screen, the easiest way to assign this is just pull it down, and as we can see, we're going to be able to just automatically select whichever one of these cue links we want. I like putting cutoff at the top. Again, you could put yours at the bottom. I hit that, I hit learn, I wiggle that, and I get response that now the cue link has been assigned here. Typically after that, we're going to go into resonance. So I'm going to click on this for cue link 10, wiggle my resonance, and we can see that that's also been assigned. I also like to do the envelope on there. So let me go ahead and wiggle the envelope. That's been assigned. And on this last one, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to assign this to the filter type of filter 1 so we can play around and experiment a little bit. Now we do have to close this, but let's just wiggle our selector knob and we can see that now that has been assigned to this cue link. Let's pull this down and take off learn. And now we have hands-on control. We can jack up the resonance here. Got to be careful with the resonance because sometimes that gets a little hot. And the envelope is how much is actually affecting the sound. You can hear right now pretty much none of the sound is being affected because we don't have the filter actually being assigned to the sound. So let's bring this down here. And we can check out what these other filters sound like by using this cue link right here. Okay, cool. Now I'm actually in a high pass or low cut filter. Cutting off the sound, and let's just do something a little bit more dramatic. Here's a band pass. But for this example, let's go all the way back up and let's just stick with low 8, which is going to be our classic low pass filter. So now we have bank 1 as our amp envelope and bank 2 assigned to our filters. But now let's take it one step farther and start assigning effects. We still have 2 more cue link banks here, which means we have 8 more knobs that we can assign to effects to really take this sound much farther. So let's go back into our main. Let's open up our channel strip here and go into the effect. So traditionally, a lot of synths will have at least a reverb and a delay, but you can really add anything you want. I'm just going to show you how to add a reverb and a delay and then how to map them to the cue links, and then you can take it even farther with adding some of your own unique sounds that you want in there. So first thing we're going to do is let's just come in here and add the delay pro. Now we have a little bit of delay going on with our synth. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have a little bit of control. So I'm on my third page right here, and what I want to do is, let's say, assign this one to the mix so I can adjust how much delay is actually happening. And maybe I select a couple other parameters for these two, or I could just do the mix and then come in and change the preset and experiment around. Again, we pull down, we go tap the top one that we want, we go to learn, and then we give mix a wiggle right here. We see that it's assigned. And now if I take off learn, just to be safe, I can come in and pull this mix all the way down. And then let's bring it in. And remember, I still have the filter right here, so let's open up the filter. Now, I could also assign this to another parameter. A very popular one to assign this to would be something along the lines of the feedback. So let's do that. Let's pull down, make sure this is selected, hit learn, wiggle the feedback. And the feedback is essentially how long the sound is going to go. So that's a short feedback. If I crank this all the way up, sometimes we get a audio loop going on. And you got to be careful with that one because it can just keep going and get even more and more intense. So now we have delay on these two knobs on our third bank. Let's go back and let's actually add on a little reverb. And before anything, I'm going to go in and just assign this to the mix and then this one to the time. So I'm going to pull this one down, click on this guy right here, hit learn. I like this one to be the mix. And then click on this one right here. Learn is still on. This one's on time. And now I have the ability from these four. Let's just turn the delay all the way off. And now I can go ahead and tweak the reverb. Again, let's go back into our filter. And now we have delay, reverb, and we still have one extra bank as well as two extra slots for even more effects. So now that we've gone through and created our own custom sound, let's go ahead and go into menu, and down at the bottom we see save. And what we want to do is save this track. So we're going to save this track. We can put it anywhere we want. I'm just going to save it right here on my internal. It defaults to the tracks. Hit save. And what that's going to do is copy over all the samples and all the mapping to all those effects. So let's just say we have a new project here. So if I wanted to then bring this into a new project, I just go into the main menu, go to browse, go to MPC documents, and we should have tracks right here. And we can see our SUB37. Now this will bring in all the samples and then also all the mapping. The one thing we do have to change is just hold this down and turn this back into track. And now our cue links are going to be controlling everything that we have pre-mapped on that track, such as the mix, the feedback. We go into our reverb here, and we should have the mix, the time, as well as our attack, decay, sustain, release, all of our filters, and then anything that we've set up on this fourth slot right here. All right, I hope this video helped you see the power of the MPC auto sampler. And again, if you're part of the Patreon community, make sure you go there, download the Subsequent 37 expansion pack so then you can load it into your MPC and follow along with all the sound design tips in this video. Now, I make these videos in hopes of inspiring you to make more music and to express yourself. And on that note, I'm actually gonna bring this back into the studio, plug it back in, and work on some tracks that I have in the mix. My name is Stu. This is Create, Educate, and Inspire. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Now go make something cool. All right, peace.